Hello everyone, today I'm going to be doing a review of the seventh studio album by pop international superstar Madonna. This album is titled Ray of Light and it was released February 22nd, 1998. This is one of her most critically acclaimed albums and it is my personal favorite record of hers, and I think that honestly it was probably one of the career highlights for her. Looking back at her 35 plus year, I don't know if she's ever going to be able to top this album or if she's ever going to come even close to doing so, because this really was like an apex for her. She was getting the most critical acclaim she'd ever done. She won 4 Grammy Awards out of all of her nominations for this route for this album. This was an album that really got her, the recognition that I knew she always wanted from the beginning, but it put her on a pedestal a little bit above just a pop entertainer. This has her best vocal delivery that she's ever produced. This has some of the most in-depth personal lyrics that she's ever written. I mean, all in all feels like a very aware and conscious record. And it did signal a shift, I think, in Madonna in her own life, coming from where she was just sort of this starlet who was living in this fame sort of world and releasing pop music, possibly a little too quickly. She was not so much in control of her image. And then she decided to, and then got very provocative, with erotica and the sex book. And there was so much controversy around her. She was doing what she felt like she needed to do, and I respect Madonna for all the things that she's done in her career. I think that she has pioneered for women in entertainment so much about controlling their own sexuality. And when she chose to perform in Evita, which was an Academy Award nominated film that was based off of Argentine political leader of Eva Perón, where she truly got to perform, that iconic "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina." She found herself in sort of a more, I think, lofty and more kind of socially conscious role. And I think the combination of her starring in this film that had such a political message and the combination of this being an Academy Award nominated film, that I think kind of culminated in her realizing that she wanted to branch out and maybe try to be a little bit more transcendent of pop music, something that's a little bit more timeless, something that's not so shock and awe or so, based in just sexuality. Besides, she had done the sex album already. And this was her time of looking inward and being introspective. She took a lot of vocal training lessons for the role of Evita. So her vocals were at their peak when she was recording for this album. And there was such a much fuller range and timbre to her voice, which you can just really hear. I mean, Madonna's not always known as being an amazing vocalist, but she has the chops to do so if she wants to practice and hone her sound. And this is the album that she really thankfully did decide to really put in the effort and really train her voice to sound so melodic and beautiful and rich in sound. She obviously had the birth of her first daughter, Lourdes, in 1996, which really inspired the bulk of the thematic content of this album. It fundamentally changed her to become a mother. And I think it would change many women who have, lived a life of 30 years of living for themselves. She's talked about in interviews how before her birth of her daughter, she felt so selfish. Everything was about herself, her own image, what she could get. And now, as soon as she became pregnant, everything changed for her. Her whole world shifted to not just focusing now on this newborn baby in her life, but also on thinking more about being a service to others instead of to yourself all the time. She says it was a moral lesson that she needed to learn, and it was truly evident through looking at the thematic content of her music subsequently, because although Ray of Light is her most spiritually focused album, an altruistically focused album, her later works do have a more socially conscious bearing to them that some of her earlier stuff did not have. You can really see the split and the difference that changed her in 1996 from the birth of her daughter. So, diving right into this, I mean, I have so much to say about this album. It's one of my top favorite albums of all time, one of the best albums of the 90s, and it is definitely the best album of Madonna's. I believe she has 13 albums under her belt now. So it goes without saying that, there's a lot to say. I mean, critics have said and raved about this review. She collaborated with British electronic producer William Orbit, who I'm now a huge fan of because of his production on this album. He has such a unique sound that is very spacey and psychedelic, but it feels very comforting. And you have to remember this album was made in the late 90s when electronica, trip hop, sort of new age synthetic sounds was still kind of not really heard in pop music. And this was a very avant-garde record to be created at that time, and it is credited to be the album that brought electronica into mainstream pop music because it was then used by other artists in the 2000s a lot more prominently. So this album was trend-setting for a lot of ways. It was also trend-setting in that it was showing an artist who had been so provocative and so avant-garde to shift completely into something and into a wholly different image, which you see a lot of artists now embracing, coming even to the present day with their shift in approach and atmosphere and their tone and image for different from different album to album. This album literally is a ray of light in Madonna's life, and it is a ray of light in the music industry. And so for that, I just have to give this album all of the applause it can garner. Let's talk about the first song here, Drowned World, Substitute for Love. This song is partly inspired by a post-apocalyptic science novel by J.G. Ballard titled The Drowned World from the 1960s. This song has a very trip hop and spacey kind of hip hop vibe to it, but it's not quite a ballad because it shifts in form to getting very upbeat and very urgent, but from starting out so contemplative and so subtle. And I think it's the perfect intro to this album because it really showcases not only Madonna's voice as being more hushed, calm, controlled, reflective, yet still with full vocal range. It also really showcases William Orbit's production in one of the best ways because his production gets quite a spotlight on this record. The bouncy sort of synths are so elegantly balanced with her melodic voice. And so this song transitions you into some of the more urgent or more fast-paced sort of rave house songs that are on this record because there's a lot of them. This is definitely, make no mistake, still a dance record. You know, a lot of Madonna's music is dance, but you don't necessarily think of Ray of Light as necessarily being all about dance. You think of it being something more spiritual, like praying or being still and contemplative or meditating. And this album is so unique because it bridges meditative prayer-like music with dance hall sort of house sounds that makes you really kind of want to dance but also be super meditative at the same time. It sort of harkens to the idea of how dance can be meditation, and I really like that about this record. The end of the song, I mean, the theme of this song talks about how she found herself through her daughter's birth. And she talks about, this is my religion, this is my understanding of spirituality. I'm going to tell you in this album my spiritual grapplings that I've been dealing with. She started to get into a lot of different religions. I mean, she was brought up Catholic, but until this point, she had never really explored different spiritual avenues. So she began to explore the Kabbalah, which she has become a semi-devout follower of ever since, which is an esoteric understanding of the Torah, of the Jewish faith. She also studied Hinduism and Buddhism, as well as started to get really into yoga, which is something that I know a lot of women started to embrace in the 90s anyway, and I think Madonna was kind of one of the reasons for this because she, along with women like Oprah Winfrey and a few others in the mainstream, really embraced meditation and yoga as something that not just for women, is for men as well, although it was mostly women that caught on with it at first, as something that can really help heal you, not just going to church every day. You know, there's other alternatives to your spirituality that can help with exercise, fitness, and wellness. And so Madonna fully embraced this, and so she became a devout lover of yoga to this day from this time period, and that's evident in this music. The next track, Swim, is one of my favorites on this record. It's more bouncy, and it's a little bit more like a pop song in its melody. It has almost like a very, uplifting pop sound, but then it has like this production that is so mellow and so almost introspective and melancholy at the same time. Again, some very beautiful guitar riffs, which kind of make you think of being at the beach. She's talking about swimming to the unknown, swimming to another shore, finding yourself in this spiritual quest and longing, but also understanding that the world is messed up. She talks about people killing other people and churches burning their preachers, you know, this messed up world that we have, yet it's so beautiful and mysterious. It's also known that by William Orbit confirmed that this song was also written the day that Gianni Versace was killed in Miami, Florida. So this song deals a lot with loss of someone and the mystery of where they went and the tragedy of that as well. But the titular song on this record, Ray of Light, is the absolute highlight because it is the most rave, pop, house, dance, electronic fun fest that Madonna has ever made. I don't think she's ever going to make another song quite like this one. And I don't know if she necessarily needs to because this song stands on its own 2 feet so confidently, so magnetically. This song is the definition of what ecstatic, euphoric, spiritual exploration is supposed to be about. You know, she's throwing all these lyrics that may not make sense at first, but it's not supposed to. She's just talking about time and life and energy and vigor of living and experiencing and mystery and all of these things swirling together like the cacophonous sounds you hear of this electronica that is just draws you in. I mean, the music video is like on LSD, you know, she's just like literally, it's like a surrender to some sort of higher kind of ecstasy. It reminds you a little bit of what could be considered a kundalini awakening, which people talk about in different forms of yoga. And so I don't know if she was necessarily going that route, but the song definitely harkens to that. This song won a lot of awards. I mean, it's one of the best singles that she's ever created. It definitely fit on mainstream radio, which was so awesome, but it just sounded like nothing else that was being made at the time, especially in pop music. And so for that, this song in so many ways, it carries the bulk of this album, but it has just such a beautiful feeling that carries this positive, uplifting sort of introspective theme so much further. The next song is called Candy Perfume Girl. This is probably one of the more enigmatic sort of songs that I don't really understand that much in terms of thematic lyrical content. And it is one of the more sensual songs on this record. This has some classic guitar riffs. It has a grunge sound, a little bit more of a punk sound, but it still has some really beautiful electronic elements and synths to it that really adds sort of a weird sort of juxtaposition, but it sounds good. She's sort of singing, I think, to be some extent about temptation, and she's singing about, you know, sex, but in a completely different way, a very enigmatic and abstract way from, you know, the brazen sort of sex songs that she made for like the erotica era. The next song is called Skin, and this one goes back to being sort of very haunting and almost somber in its approach at the beginning, but then it sort of lightens up when it talks about like yearning for touch. You know, this song is the other sort of really sexual song. Candy Perfume Girls and Skin are two songs that are more a little bit more about intimacy. And it's like intimacy, but in a more spiritual sense. But it can still be talking about sex, or it can still be talking about longing for touch. And so the song carries all these different layers and meanings. Again, amazing abstract electronic vibes on this route. The ambient sounds are amazing on this song. There's some tribal ethnic world sounds that is introduced on this song that really carries sort of this Eastern feel, which shifts the gaze of this album from towards a more sort of Eastern religion ideology, which I think serves the album very well considering the tone of this record. The next song, Nothing Really Matters, is the most nihilistic song that Madonna, who was once proclaimed to be the material girl, has ever created. It's kind of crazy how someone can go from writing a song that is so about the material and so about like what, you know, you would consider shallow kind of non-spiritual understandings of the world to be in Material Girl, to come to a song 10 years later that's called Nothing Really Matters, which is a very sort of bleak and obtruse song. And the core of it, it's just saying love is all we need. You know, in a way, it's her all you need is love, but it's pessimistic, which I think fits the tone of some of this record, because although this record is hopeful, this record is also very mournful and sorrowful. And the songs kind of piggyback between trying to uplift you, but also try to make you feel very kind of humbled by the sadness and vastness of the universe. You know, she's not trying to hide the fact that this is a very dark world that we live in, and nothing really matters but love. And that can be a very freeing concept, or it can be sort of like a rejection of material reality, which coming from someone who has been so much about that can seem like such a shift that would be difficult to embody. It's like a Tibetan monk, swearing off like everything but minimal needs, living in the middle of a monastery. And the music video is probably one of the most unique and sort of weird music videos that she's ever created. She has like these little children dancing around. It's very geisha inspired and very inspired by Japanese culture. And I think that that's really interesting. And she sort of embraces this dark haired geisha look for her Drowned World tour in 2001, where she performed songs from this album as well as her subsequent album, Music. And I really think it fits the tone of this record. This is sort of the darker side of Ray of Light in that it's portraying, you have to go through some darkness to overcome and feel the light of life and love, and spiritual understanding is not easy to come to. You have to understand that there is suffering in this world. And so this song kind of, and the video kind of portrays suffering, but in sort of very artistic and didactic way that really shows overcoming it and understanding that love is needed in this space more than ever. The message is so urgent and beautiful. The next two songs are the most esoteric songs on this record and the most, maybe more Buddhist and Hindu inspired. Sky Fits Heaven is one of the most beautiful songs with some of the most, I think, esoteric lyrics that Madonna has ever put to paper. Sky fits heaven, so fly it. That's what the prophet said to me. Child fits mother, so hold your baby tight. That's what my future could see. So she's, of course, referencing that she is now a newborn mother. Fate fits karma, so use it. That's what the wise man said to me. Make sure that you understand that karmically what comes around goes around. Do unto others as you would do unto yourself. Love fits virtue, so hold on to the light. Don't lose sight of your faith throughout whatever happens. That's what our future will be. So if you do these things, you will manifest your reality. And so she's going into this very sort of aesthetic where she's trying to really preach the gospel as she understands it. She's preaching what all these religions are teaching her. She talks about in understanding and studying Buddhism, Hinduism, the Kabbalah, Catholicism, all of these, Islam, all of these religions, she talks about how there's through lines and how all of these things have pieces of the truth. And that's truly what I believe. There's beauty and connection between all of these religions at finding something sacred within ourselves and to source or to whatever you consider God to be, and will help you find love and understanding in the universe. Now, there are differences and there are some things that are not so positive in there as well. But if you learn to not be controlled by those kinds of things and not to lose sight of the true purpose of these religions because of them, you will understand what the gospel was really saying all along, or what the prophet was always talking about. She then says, traveling down this road, watching the signs as I go, I think I'll follow the sun. She's just talking about how she doesn't really have any answers, but she's always going to be looking for them. She's always going to be trying to learn more. And that's in the spiritual discovery and the path that we all follow. That is how we move. And so this song, it's the most humble and, I don't know how to explain it, but it's Madonna, the guru on the mountain, preaching to us. It reminds me a lot of, Bjork with her Homogenic album, And so I really, this song in particular, just the message of it is so clear cutting and so poignant and so needed in this time that, you can just tell that Madonna is a very wise person. And if more people could understand that religion in this way, we wouldn't have so much conflict and strife over differing, opinions on certain things that might have happened or might not have happened. We're losing sight of what religion and spirituality is really about. And it's the journey, not the destination. Okay, then we come to the track called Shanti Ashtangi. This song, at first glance, is just like her yoga song because she has a lot of ohms, which is something you always say during yoga. She does hatha yoga a lot, and so this song is inspired a lot by that. She has an Indian accent in some of the songs, which I know she had to work really hard to get right because it's not something you want to butcher because it could come off as sort of insulting. I think she does a pretty good job. I don't think it's pompous, to be honest, for her to be doing this. The whole album kind of nestles this song in enough of its sort of surroundings that it feels in place. It doesn't feel like she's stretching. You know, who would have thought 10 years before this, when, you know, Madonna again was like a virgin or the Material Girl, that she was going to make a song 10 years later where she was going to be singing a Hindu Sanskrit prayer. It's up tempo and it has some world and ethnic sounds in the background. And it has just like a serene sort of chant and mantra like feel. You know, the album was going to be originally titled Mantra, but she decided to name the album after one of the songs on the record, Ray of Light. And so this song very much speaks to that, you know, because she's embracing another culture's idea of spirituality and using it in a sort of uplifting way and promoting it. And I think that it was very wise move for her. And like I said before, it does not feel out of place. Then we come to the lead single off of this album, one of my favorite Madonna songs of all time. This song literally changed everything when it was released, because to this point, no one knew what her next album was going to sound like. And so when this song was released, it really floored everyone because it introduced the album so beautifully. This song is sparse but powerful. Frozen is a song about heartache and yearning for someone to open their heart, to understand, to move beyond the darkness and shallowness of not understanding other people. This song can be read on just a basic relationship level, but it could also be read in a socio-cultural level about someone who needs to awaken their higher self. And so this song speaks of, you know, you're frozen when your mind's not open or your heart's not open. And the imagery is very stark. She's in this desert and she's sort of embodying this witch, and she's conjuring these ravens out of the earth, and she's got all these, you know, Indian motifs on her hands, and she's almost conducting this ritual in the middle of the desert, trying to conjure from nothing, a place with no water, completely barren, trying to unfreeze or to unleash the beauty of what humanity could be, or what a relationship, what a boyfriend could be, or to try and heal someone, to try and bring them to their true self. That's how I interpret this song. It has the most beautiful string arrangements. Again, this song reminds me a lot of Bjork's Homogenic album. And these albums came out around the same time, so I don't know if they were necessarily influenced, but, you know, Madonna was very much aware of Bjork. And so I think that there was a little bit of influence there with the strings building up into something with some of the darker sort of industrial electronic things in the underneath of the song. It's really dark, but beautiful and uplifting. It's that flower that blooms in the middle of the desert without anyone expecting it to. The next song, Power of Goodbye, actually might be my favorite song on this album. I'm sort of torn between Ray of Light, Power of Goodbye, and one other song, Sky Fits Heaven. But Power of Goodbye definitely has probably one of the most melodically pleasing sounds to it. It's more of a traditional pop song in its delivery, and she kind of almost is going into a little bit more familiar territory for her with songs that she's done in the past, like from Bedtime Stories or from her earlier records. But it still feels new and fresh and spiritually rejuvenated. But it's a longing, and it reflects on heartache. It's saying, you know, we have to learn to say goodbye sometimes. Part of life is accepting that. And so this song is embracing the sadness of reality. And it's a needed song towards the end of this record. The end of this record does get a little bit more somber in nature, and I think that reflects the sort of coming to understand that after the highs there can be a lot of lows, but you need to understand that this is just the cycle and rhythm of emotion and spirituality and living. And so for me, the Power of Goodbye is uplifting at the same time. It's going to be okay. You just have to learn to move on from this. It's so difficult. You can literally hear the pain in her voice. This is some of the most emotional vocals she's ever performed, and it just tears at your heartstrings. But you have to learn to say goodbye, because otherwise you will be stuck. Karmically, you'll be stuck. Spiritually, you won't be able to move on. And life is just about the journey. You know, it's about meeting people, and sometimes they leave. And although it's hard, you have to accept that everything is meant to be, and this is going to be okay in the end. So it has that light at the end of the tunnel, and I really appreciate this song for that. And again, the most beautiful, haunting melody on this record, or one of any of Madonna's catalog, to be honest. Then we come to Have and Not to Hold, a song about a distant lover who is holding someone close, but is not letting them fully hold them forever. we all know how painful that can be. And I can't help but think that this song is somewhat written about the person that she fell in love with, who she bore Lourdes from. You know, the man that she met before during that time period, who she eventually didn't last very long with. I have a feeling that this song is about that because she felt like there was love there, but he wasn't fully committed, and she had to learn to break free from that. This song also has, again, a little bit more of some spiritual anecdotes talking about be careful about grasping onto something. It's sort of like the Buddhist mantra of everything being impermanent and never grasping to hold something forever. This song actually, I think, is very much inspired by Buddhism because it does talk about the fact that nothing can necessarily, if the cause of suffering is trying to hold on to something. So you have to let go of it. You know, you have to understand that, like a river, everything just keeps moving. And as long as you try not to grab, you'll never be sad or suffer, which of course is almost impossible in our reality. But this song reflects on that. And I think that this sort of, although kind of more of a negative sentiment, is still very empowering, a la the same narrative of the power of goodbye. And I think if you listen to it and sort of take it to heart, it helps when you're dealing with someone who is also being distant and not really giving you what you deserve. Maybe you shouldn't cling so desperately. I know it's hard, but you kind of have to learn to let this person go. The next song, Little Star, if she's singing about her ex-lover in the previous, this song is a song entirely 100% devoted to her baby daughter Lourdes, who literally was the light of her world and still is. She now has, of course, other children, but this was her, first experience as being a mother, and you can just tell how in awe this was for her, to just birth another human being, I cannot really begin to understand. It sounds cheesy sometimes to people. It's like, well, everyone's a mother and everyone loves their children. But until you're a mother, or even a father, you don't understand what it's like to have one of your own come from your own flesh and blood. And or if you adopt, to know that you are there 100% for this child, and you must take care and nurture this, and you love it with all of your heart, with all of you, with 150%. And so she had to make this song to sing almost like a lullaby to her as she went to sleep. I can see Madonna singing this song. It's a perfect lullaby. It's paying homage to her. It's got some more childish sort of lyrics, but it fits because she's singing to a child. And so the playful and innocence of this song fits beautifully in the context of this record. And it does provide a little bit more light and airiness to the sort of more somber ending part of this record, which is very somber and very reflective. The final song, Mer Girl, touches on some of the most somber and reflective lyrics that Madonna has ever dealt with. And this is one of those songs that is probably so personal to Madonna that she probably couldn't sing live without tearing up, because this song is about the death of her mother. Madonna lost her mother when she was very young. I believe she was only around 5 years old. And this has haunted her whole life. And I can only begin to imagine what that must feel like. And partly is the reason why being a mother for her was so spiritually rejuvenating, because she felt her own mother's love. Finally, for the first time, she could channel that into her own daughter and have someone else to take care of instead of feeling sorry for herself all the time. And the feeling of her mother's memory felt like it was being carried on. I ran from my house that cannot contain me, from the man that I cannot keep, from my mother who haunts me, even though she's gone, from my daughter that never sleeps. I ran from the noise and the silence, from the traffic on the streets. I ran to the treetops, I ran to the sky, out to the lake, into the rain that matted my hair and soaked my shoes and skin, hid my tears, hid my fears. I ran to the forest, I ran to the trees, I ran and ran. I was looking for me, and the crooked old mailbox past the apple orchards, and the lady that never talks. She's injecting some very autobiographical illustrations into this narrative, which is more abstract because she's trying to reconcile her past. Up into the hills, I ran to the cemetery and thought about your death. I ran to the lake, up into the hills. I ran and I ran. I'm looking there still, and I saw the crumbling tombstones, all the forgotten names. I tasted the rain. I tasted my tears. I cursed the angels. I tasted my fears. And the ground gave way beneath my feet, and the earth took me in her arms. Leaves covered my face. Ants marched across my back. Black sky opened up, blinding me. I ran and I ran. I am looking there still. And I smelled her burning flesh, her rotting bones, her decay. I ran and I ran. I'm still running away. I had to read the whole lyrics for this song because this is a story. You know, it's a poem, but it's also a story, and it's different from anything she's ever recorded before because every line is so important, and the full scope of it really carries you along this journey. And like I said, it's just the absolutely most touching song. When I first heard this, I literally felt her pain, and you can easily relate it to any sort of personal experience that you've had. I haven't thankfully not lost a parent or loved one like this so young, but you know, I can relate to other experiences where I feel like maybe mourning the loss of my childhood, you know, running and running away and constantly yearning for something. This sort of nomadic heart that we all sensitive spiritual people have. I can so relate to this. And so for me, this is, again, like I said, one of the most beautiful, heartfelt, touching songs. Very difficult to listen to, though, because it really gets you in that headspace. This album, again, I mean, what else can I say? It transformed pop culture, and it proved that Madonna is a very wise and spiritual person. And of course, it's been a bumpy road for Madonna since. You know, she's had some really good albums, and then she's had some not so good albums in the recent years. But, you know, I sense still that maybe Madonna coming through all of this, I still see a very enlightened and wise woman in her when I listen to her interviews and when she talks about her philanthropic efforts or when she talks about religion or her children, you can tell, or politics even, you can tell that she is very aware of the world and she wants to make a difference. She's not just a shallow pop star. And you can tell also that, you know, she's wanted to sort of rebel a bit against some of her 80s image because of it being so materialistic. So this album is the cornerstone of her career, and it is a must listen to anyone, not just Madonna fans. This was my gateway album to Madonna. So I highly recommend if you're kind of curious about Madonna, but you're not necessarily into all of her like really heavy like pop, you know, kind of stuff, I recommend this album. And if it's the only album you like of hers, then that's fine because it really is her best work. And to be honest, I still feel I don't know if she's ever going to be able to top it. I don't know if she even wants to. I don't know. We'll see what the future holds for her. But this album will always hold a special place in my heart, and this is one of the signifying albums of the turn of the millennia. So, you know, it signifies the awakening of, I think, mass media to understanding, you know, to get away from dogma, to get away from negative religious aspects of spirituality and more open and sort of fluid understandings of the self and spiritual understanding of this world. A more humbling, you know, one with nature, one with meditation, one with divine feminine, one with unity and equilibrium with everything. And so this album carries that universalist message so strongly on its back. I will always be thankful for it. So let me know what you thought, any Madonna fans, about this record and how it changed your life. I do plan on reviewing a few other Madonna records because I do have a few others that I do really love. But then there's also some that I'm not so crazy about, so I'll sort of let you know. I may make a video about Madonna's entire discography, talking about her best songs and her worst and stuff like that. Of course, this is all my own opinion, but subscribe for any more of that, and of course, reviews on other music and albums coming, tons coming down the pike. So, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching. Peace, love, and light. Bye.